Don't look now, but the quote-unquote tanking Utah Jazz at the time of recording this video are in first place in the Western Conference. Yes, you heard that correctly. This team has absolutely found its stride early in the season, and it's safe to say they are shocking the basketball world. If you follow the NBA, you were expecting this team to tank, especially once Danny Ainge became the CEO of basketball operations, because we know how much this man loves draft picks and understands the value of them. And this quote by Danny Ainge speaks volumes. If you're not contending, then you're rebuilding. Nailed it. And in all fairness, I guess the Utah Jazz were quote-unquote contending with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, but they really weren't that close to actually winning something outside of being a good front runner and winning a ton of games during the regular season. And if you go back to Danny Ainge's quote, he knew it was time to pull the plug and reset the roster. Throughout Danny Ainge's time of being an executive in his NBA career, he seemed to always be ahead of the curve on these type of situations. Rudy Gobert to the Wolves for several firsts and some rotational players that were actually flipped into more assets for the team, and some of those rotational players end up being key players on this Jazz roster. Donovan Mitchell to the Cavs for multiple firsts and also some rotational players. Same deal here. Unutilized role players came back in the deal for Donovan Mitchell, and they ended up being key starters on this Utah Jazz's roster. And he also traded other rotational or role players on the Jazz for more assets for the team. So he's basically sitting on a bunch of good players and a lot of picks. And once he started making all these moves, everyone expected they were going to tank for generational superstar Victor Wembanyama. And I was definitely one of those people, but they have done basically the complete opposite. The team is playing well, and yes, it's early in the season, but there's just no other way to say it. The players have bought in and made it very clear that they knew they were going to be a lot better than what the media and the basketball world would give them the credit for. They knew as early as the first couple days in training camp that they actually had something on this team. Taylor Horton Tucker said, everyone came into the year saying they thought we were going to lose and stuff like that, but pretty much after the second or third day of camp, we kind of knew we weren't going to be bad, Horton Tucker said. And after the Utah Jazz's hot start, Danny Ainge was asked about the Jazz's winning, and he has a message for those who suggest he may be bothered by it. I mean, come on, Ainge said. Who would say that? And who would I ever tell that to? Just think about that for 1 second. It just assume that's how I feel? Give me a break. I've been accused of building teams to lose before. It's never been true. The Utah Jazz are just proving you can have a bunch of good players and not the best players to win games in this league. And yes, it's possible that the Utah Jazz are going to come back down to earth. And honestly, I believe they will at some point. But that still doesn't detract from the fact that if you have a decent roster and you're well coached, you can succeed in this league. And it seems like Danny Ainge is starting a trend here. If you look across the NBA, the super teams are struggling. The Nets, the Lakers, and so many other teams that have tried their hardest to achieve a super team, but just never get there because you need so much to happen for you to get 2 or 3 of the top 25 players in the world on the same team. And let's just say you do get a bunch of top 25 players. You now have another issue on your hands. Team chemistry and egos will ruin locker rooms. And these issues seem to be more likely than not, especially when you're dealing with these type of players who are so great and they don't think they need anyone around them. Which is why this model is starting to become outdated. Now let's look at what's working. The teams that are currently thriving right now are the teams that have homegrown talent and add role players around the best players in the team without selling off all their young and rotational pieces to get superstar players. And just aren't subscribing to the true super team model where you can have multiple good players on your team instead of having 2 great players. And Danny Ainge is leading the charge saying maybe the super team model may not be a viable option for roster building anymore in the NBA. And you know what's funny about Danny Ainge being a frontrunner on this new theory? Who gets credit for starting the super team era? Or better yet, the Big 3 era? A lot of the time, the Boston Celtics. And who was the GM on those Boston Celtics teams? No other than Danny Ainge. When I was talking about this with a buddy of mine, it blew my mind when we came to this conclusion because this man is killing a narrative that he started. Absolutely insane. But with all that being said, at the end of the day, Danny Ainge may have actually been trying to tank and just got lucky with the team he has. And Danny Ainge may not be the person who created the super team era, but there is no question his resume speaks for itself. And when it comes to understanding and acquiring high-end talent and just pure roster building, there may not be anyone better than Trader Danny. So I'm just gonna go with my gut on this one and say maybe he knows what he's doing here. That's it, y'all. If you made it this far, you obviously liked the video a little bit, so make sure you hammer the subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment. I'm gonna be posting these types of videos once or twice a week going forward. Haven't totally figured out my schedule yet, but you can assume it'll be at least once a week. Thanks for watching. Talk to you guys soon.